I'm Courtney, 38, and my life took an unexpected turn 3 years ago when I married James and became a stepmom to his daughter Zoe. I thought we were building something beautiful together, a blended family where love and respect flowed both ways. But when Zoe's biological mother suddenly reappeared after a decade of absence, everything changed. Last week, those painful words tumbled from Zoe's mouth, slicing through my heart. "Stop trying to be my dad. You're just the guy who pays for things." Before I continue this story, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and join our community of real-life storytellers. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. My journey with James began after my divorce was finalized. I had been raising my son Tyler, who was 9 at the time, while building my career in real estate. The housing market in our area was booming, and I had finally found my footing professionally after years of struggle. My ex-husband had moved across the country for a job opportunity, making appearances in Tyler's life inconsistent at best. I was determined to provide stability and love enough for 2 parents. I met James at a charity auction for the local children's hospital. He had donated a significant business consulting package, and I was there representing my real estate firm. We were seated at the same table, and conversation flowed easily between us. There was something about his quiet confidence and genuine smile that caught my attention. By the end of the evening, we had exchanged business cards with personal numbers scribbled on the backs. Our first date was coffee that stretched into lunch, and then an afternoon walk in the park. James told me about his daughter Zoe, who was 14 at the time. His wife Alicia had left them when Zoe was just 7 years old, disappearing without warning. He had received divorce papers through a lawyer months later, but never heard directly from Alicia again. James had raised Zoe alone for 10 years, building his consulting business while juggling school events and childhood illnesses. The pride in his voice when he spoke about his daughter was unmistakable. I was cautious about bringing someone new into Tyler's life, and James felt the same about Zoe. We dated for 6 months before introducing our children to each other. The first meeting was a casual picnic at a local park neutral territory where everyone could relax. Tyler was immediately fascinated by the big kid Zoe, who showed surprising patience with his endless questions about middle school. Zoe was reserved but polite, her dark eyes watching me carefully whenever I spoke with her father. James proposed a year after we met on the anniversary of our first date. We were married in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Zoe served as her father's best person, wearing a suit that matched his. Tyler was my man of honor, beaming with importance. We bought a new house together, one that hadn't belonged to either of our previous lives, and started the delicate process of blending our family. The early days of our marriage were filled with adjustment, but also joy. Zoe and I found connection through cooking together. She had inherited her father's talent in the kitchen and was eager to learn new recipes. I taught her my grandmother's secret cookie recipe, and she showed me how to make her father's favorite pasta dish. We went shopping for her high school formal dress, spent weekends redecorating her new bedroom, and established a Sunday night movie tradition where we alternated choosing films. Tyler looked up to Zoe with absolute adoration. She helped him with homework and taught him how to skateboard. Watching them develop a sibling-like relationship warmed my heart. James would catch my eye across the room during these moments, his expression reflecting my own happiness. I was careful not to overstep boundaries with Zoe. I never tried to replace her mother or demand affection that hadn't been earned. I attended parent-teacher conferences with James, but let him take the lead. I offered advice when asked, but respected his final decisions regarding Zoe's upbringing. Gradually, I felt her warming to me, accepting my presence in their lives. The first signs of trouble appeared shortly after Zoe turned 16. The sweet, engaged girl became increasingly withdrawn. She spent more time locked in her bedroom and snapped at Tyler over small irritations. I attributed the changes to normal teenage development, the surge of hormones and identity-seeking that comes with that difficult age. James's consulting business was expanding, requiring more travel than before. As the more physically present parent, I took on more responsibility for daily oversight of Zoe's activities. I drove her to volleyball practice, monitored her homework completion, and enforced curfews. James and I talked every night when he traveled, making parenting decisions together. But the practical implementation fell to me. As my real estate career flourished, I began contributing more financially to our family. James and I maintained some separate accounts, but pooled resources for household expenses and children's needs. I added substantially to the college fund James had started for Zoe, knowing that educational opportunities would shape her future. I bought her first car, a reliable used model that would get her safely to school and her part-time job at the local bookstore. I covered her cell phone bill, clothing budget, and extracurricular activities without complaint. These weren't obligations to me, but investments in our family's well-being. I wanted both children to have advantages I had lacked growing up. I never expected my financial contributions to become a weapon used against me. I never imagined that the girl who had shared midnight ice cream with me during her first heartbreak would one day view me as nothing more than a walking wallet. But life rarely unfolds as we expect, and the biggest challenges often arrive without warning. The text came on a Tuesday afternoon as I was finishing a client meeting. "Someone named Alicia is here asking about Zoe. Says she's her mother. Need guidance." Our housekeeper, Angela, sounded understandably confused. In the 3 years I had been married to James, Alicia's name had rarely been mentioned, and never with any indication she might resurface. "Tell her James and Zoe aren't home, and ask her to leave contact information," I replied, my hands suddenly shaky. I immediately called James, who was equally shocked, but promised to head home immediately from his office downtown. By the time I arrived home, James was sitting stiffly in our living room across from a woman with Zoe's eyes and cheekbones. Alicia looked simultaneously familiar and strange, like seeing a childhood friend aged by hard living. Her clothes were stylish, but worn, her makeup carefully applied over skin that had seen sun and stress. Angela had wisely taken Tyler to get ice cream, sparing him the tension crackling through our home. Alicia's story emerged in pieces. After leaving James and Zoe, she had moved to Arizona with a boyfriend falling into drug use that consumed the next several years. She had been sober for 3 years now, working as an administrative assistant and attending community college classes. She had come back to reconnect with the daughter she had abandoned, claiming that making amends was part of her recovery process. James listened with guarded expression, asking pointed questions about her stability and intentions. When Zoe came home from volleyball practice, the shock on her face transformed rapidly from confusion to anger to cautious curiosity. That first meeting was brief and supervised, with James establishing clear boundaries for future contact. Over the following weeks, Alicia became a persistent presence in our lives. James, after consulting with our family therapist, decided to allow supervised visits that gradually extended in duration. His reasoning was sound. Zoe was old enough to form her own opinions, and forbidding contact might only create forbidden fruit appeal. Better to manage the reunification process than have Zoe seek Alicia out secretly. Zoe's initial skepticism about her mother's return dissolved with alarming speed. Soon she was talking constantly about Alicia's apartment in the city, Alicia's job, Alicia's friends, Alicia's opinions. Plans with me were canceled when Alicia suggested alternatives. The cooking lessons stopped. The shopping trips dwindled. Our Sunday movie nights became occasions where Zoe sat physically present but mentally elsewhere, texting throughout whatever film was playing. I tried to be supportive while managing my growing unease. I bought extra groceries when Zoe mentioned Alicia's kitchen was sparsely stocked. I suggested including Alicia in some family activities to normalize relations. I listened without judgment when Zoe excitedly recounted stories from her mother's life. But beneath Alicia's warm smile and enthusiastic overtures to Zoe lurked subtle barbs directed at me. She consistently forgot my name, calling me Christina or Kathy, despite corrections. She made dismissive comments about the home James and I had created, suggesting it was too cookie-cutter or suburban boring for someone with Zoe's creative spirit. She questioned our parenting decisions within Zoe's hearing, undermining our authority. The breaking point of my patience came when I overheard Alicia in our kitchen telling Zoe, "I'm your real mom, she's just your dad's wife." The words were spoken softly but carried through our open floor plan home. Zoe didn't challenge the statement. Her silence hurt almost as much as Alicia's words. That night, I confronted James about Alicia's growing negative influence. "She's systematically driving a wedge between me and Zoe," I explained, citing specific examples of undermining behavior. James sighed heavily, running his hands through his hair. "I know it's not perfect, but seeing Alicia seems to make Zoe happy. After all those years of wondering why her mother left, she's finally getting some answers. Isn't that worth some temporary awkwardness?" "It's not awkwardness, James. It's calculated manipulation. Alicia is rewriting history to position herself as the misunderstood heroine and me as the interloper." "You're overreacting," James replied, his tone dismissive in a way it had never been before. "Alicia has changed. She's trying to make things right." I suggested family therapy to help navigate the situation. The session went poorly. Zoe participated minimally, offering one-word answers and checking the time repeatedly. The therapist attempted to discuss healthy boundaries and blended family dynamics, but without Zoe's engagement, little progress was made. As summer turned to fall, the tensions in our home continued to rise. The warm family atmosphere we had cultivated was growing colder by the day, and I felt increasingly powerless to reverse the change. Something fundamental had shifted, and I wasn't sure we could find our way back to solid ground. Zoe's behavior deteriorated beyond typical teenage moodiness. Her grades slipped from A's and B's to C's and D's. Her volleyball coach called, concerned about missed practices. The bookstore manager mentioned she had been showing up late for shifts and leaving early. When I attempted to discuss these issues, Zoe brushed me off with increasing hostility. One evening in October, I tried to initiate a conversation about college applications. Zoe would be graduating in the spring, and deadlines for many schools were approaching. She had once talked excitedly about studying journalism or communications, but lately had shown no interest in her future plans. "The application for Northwestern is due next month," I mentioned as she picked at her dinner. "Should we work on it this weekend? I could help you polish your essay." "I don't need your help," she replied, not looking up from her plate. "Mom thinks I should take a gap year anyway." The casual mom reference to Alicia stung as it always did. "A gap year? That's a new development. What would you do during that time?" "Mom says I could stay with her, get a job in the city, figure out what I really want." James, who had been silent during the exchange, finally spoke up. "That's the first I'm hearing of this plan. We need to discuss major decisions as a family, Zoe." "Whatever." She pushed away from the table and left her barely touched dinner behind. Later that week, Zoe asked for money to buy a designer handbag costing nearly $400. When I suggested a more reasonable alternative, she complained that all her friends had the expensive version. The following week, it was the latest smartphone model when her current phone was less than a year old. Then came requests for more expensive clothes, concert tickets in VIP sections, and weekend trips with friends. James and I found ourselves arguing about parenting approaches. He favored giving Zoe some of what she wanted to maintain peace. I worried we were reinforcing entitled behavior. "You've always been able to provide financially," James said during one heated discussion. "But not everyone values material security above emotional connection." The comment wounded me deeply. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Trying to buy affection instead of earning it?" He backpedaled immediately, but the damage was done. A seed of doubt had been planted. Was I using money as a substitute for meaningful relationship building? My concerns about Alicia's influence grew when Zoe casually mentioned something her mother had told her. According to Alicia, I was controlling Zoe's inheritance from James's family and limiting her access to what was rightfully hers. The accusation was completely fabricated. James's parents were still living, and no such inheritance existed. But the lie had served its purpose in further alienating Zoe from me. A particularly difficult dinner conversation occurred when Zoe announced she was considering living with Alicia instead of us. James looked shocked, but didn't immediately dismiss the idea. "If Alicia has truly stabilized her life, and if that's what you want, we could discuss the possibility," he said carefully. "But it would require a lot of verification and planning." I felt betrayed by his willingness to even consider the arrangement. Later that night, I asked him if he was trying to push Zoe out of our home. "Of course not," he insisted. "But she's almost 17. We can't force her to stay where she doesn't want to be. If we try, she'll just leave the moment she turns 18, possibly under worse circumstances." His logic made sense, but my heart rebelled against the idea of sending Zoe to live with someone who had abandoned her and was now actively poisoning her against us. Despite the growing distance between Zoe and me, I still loved her and wanted her to thrive. Tyler was becoming increasingly distressed by the family tension. He had grown used to having a sister figure in his life and didn't understand the sudden coldness from Zoe. I found him crying in his room one night after she had snapped at him for asking to borrow a charger. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, his 12-year-old face crumpled with confusion. "Why does Zoe hate us now?" I held him close, assuring him that Zoe was working through her own complicated feelings that had nothing to do with him. But privately, I worried about the lasting impact of this family fracture on my sensitive son. James began working longer hours and accepting more travel assignments. I suspected he was avoiding the uncomfortable home environment rather than addressing the problems directly. When he was home, conversations were superficial, focusing on logistics rather than emotions. Through it all, I continued managing the household, driving Tyler to activities, monitoring both children's schoolwork and maintaining our home. I paid for Zoe's expenses without comment, hoping the phase would pass, and we would find our way back to the family warmth we had once shared. But with each passing week, that possibility seemed to recede further into the distance like a ship sailing beyond the horizon. As Zoe's 17th birthday approached in November, I suggested hosting a party at our home. Despite the ongoing tension, I wanted to mark the occasion in a meaningful way. To my surprise, Zoe agreed quickly, producing an extensive list of party requirements. She wanted specific decorations, a professional photographer, customized cupcakes from an exclusive bakery, and entertainment beyond the usual music playlist. I agreed to most requests, drawing the line only at hiring a popular local DJ who commanded a 4-figure fee. Instead, I created a premium streaming account with customized playlists. I ordered personalized decorations in Zoe's favorite colors arranged for the photographer and secured the specialty desserts. James commented that I was going overboard, but I wanted to show Zoe that my commitment to her happiness hadn't wavered despite our difficulties. The day of the party arrived with clear skies and unseasonably warm temperature. Zoe spent the morning at a salon appointment I had arranged, returning with freshly highlighted hair and professional makeup. She seemed genuinely pleased with the decorations and setup, offering a brief but sincere, "Thanks, this looks nice," before her friends began arriving. The party progressed smoothly for the first 2 hours. 20 teenagers filled our backyard, enjoying the music photo booth and abundant food. Zoe appeared happy, laughing with friends and accepting birthday wishes graciously. James manned the outdoor grill while I replenished snacks and ensured everyone had what they needed. The disruption came when Alicia arrived unannounced, carrying an oversized gift bag and wearing an outfit more appropriate for a nightclub than a teenage birthday party. She hadn't been invited, a deliberate decision James and I had made to avoid exactly the kind of tension that immediately filled the space upon her arrival. "Mom, you came!" Zoe exclaimed, rushing to embrace Alicia. The word "mom" hung in the air between us, a repeated reminder of what I was not and never would be in Zoe's eyes. Alicia made a show of presenting her gift, an expensive leather jacket that exceeded what James and I had budgeted for our own gifts combined. "Every 17-year-old needs a power piece in her wardrobe," she announced loudly, helping Zoe try it on. I maintained a pleasant expression, continuing to host while Alicia positioned herself as the center of attention, telling animated stories that had Zoe's friends laughing. James pulled me aside, apologizing for the surprise appearance, but I waved it off. "It's Zoe's day," I said. "Let's just get through it." The party ended later than planned, with Zoe and several friends heading out for pizza afterward, despite the substantial food we had provided. James and I cleaned up the yard and kitchen in relative silence, both exhausted by the day's emotional labor. When we finally went to bed, James received a text from Zoe saying she was sleeping over at her friend Jasmine's house. He responded with a simple, "Okay, love you," and turned off his phone. The next morning, I discovered the extent of damage from the party. Beyond the expected cleanup, there were stains on our living room carpet from spilled drinks, a broken cabinet door in the bathroom, and what appeared to be cigarette burns on the outdoor furniture cushions. Most distressing was the state of the guest bathroom, where someone had apparently been sick without bothering to clean up afterward. When Zoe returned home around noon, I calmly asked her to come see the damage. "This isn't acceptable, Zoe. Your friends showed a complete lack of respect for our home." She glanced around indifferently. "So hire a cleaner. Isn't that what you usually do when things get messy?" The casual dismissal of property damage ignited my frustration. "That's not the point. This is about responsibility and respect. You're almost an adult, and I expect you to understand that actions have consequences." "God, why are you always on my case?" she complained, pulling out her phone and scrolling as I spoke. "It's not that big a deal." "It is a big deal. Your father and I worked hard to give you a nice party, and this is how you show appreciation, by letting your friends destroy our property." "You're not my father," she muttered, still looking at her phone. "Excuse me." She looked up, then her face flushing with sudden anger. "I said you're not my father. You think buying me stuff and paying for parties makes you my parent? It doesn't stop trying to be my dad. You're just the guy who pays for things." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, unable to formulate a response through the rush of hurt flooding my system. James walked into the room, catching only the tail end of Zoe's outburst. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking between us with concern. I took a deep breath, gathering my composure. Looking directly at Zoe, I said simply, "Understood," then walked out of the room, ignoring James's questions as I passed. I spent that evening alone in our bedroom, declining dinner and avoiding further confrontation. The pain of Zoe's words replayed in my mind, along with every moment of connection I thought we had shared over the years. Had it all been transactional in her eyes? Was I truly nothing more than a financial provider, interchangeable with any other adult who might fulfill that role? Through the hurt, a clarity began to emerge. If Zoe viewed me only as a source of funding, perhaps it was time to redefine that relationship on terms we both understood. I would no longer enable disrespect through financial support. Love and care would remain available, but material provision would require a foundation of basic respect. By morning, my resolve had solidified. I had been used, but I would not continue to be. The time for passive acceptance of disrespect had ended. My first call Monday morning was to our financial advisor, Martin, requesting an urgent meeting. 3 hours later, I sat in his office outlining the changes I wanted to make. Martin listened without judgment, asking clarifying questions about my intentions. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," he said when I finished explaining. "You want to liquidate the supplemental college fund you established for your stepdaughter, sell the car that's titled in your name but used by her, remove her as an authorized user on your credit cards, and separate your finances more distinctly from the family pool." "That's correct," I confirmed. "The main college fund James established remains untouched." I'm only withdrawing the portion I contributed separately. Martin nodded slowly. These are all within your legal rights. The car is titled solely to you. The supplemental college fund is in your name with Zoe as beneficiary, and authorized users can be removed from credit accounts by the primary cardholder. But have you discussed these changes with your husband? Not yet. I wanted to understand my options first. By Wednesday, the financial adjustments were complete. The college fund I had established for Zoe, containing nearly $30,000, was liquidated and transferred to my personal savings account. I listed her car for sale through my real estate firm's network and arranged for a colleague to show it while Zoe was at school. I removed her as an authorized user on my credit cards and canceled the upcoming shopping weekend I had planned to help her select winter formal attire. I also contacted the travel agent handling our planned Christmas vacation, changing the booking from 4 people to just 3, and redirected the funds for Zoe's ski lessons to a donation for Tyler's school music program. James discovered the changes Wednesday evening when he tried to use our shared banking app to transfer money for Zoe's volleyball team photos. He found me in my home office, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. What's going on with the accounts? And why is Mark Donaldson from your office showing Zoe's car to a couple right now? I set aside the contract I had been reviewing and met his gaze steadily. I've made some financial adjustments that reflect my current relationship with Zoe, since she sees me only as the guy who pays for things. I've decided to stop paying for things. His confusion deepened. What are you talking about? When did Zoe say that? I recounted the full exchange from after the party, including the exact words Zoe had hurled at me. You only heard the end of it, but she made her feelings quite clear. James sank into the chair opposite my desk. She was upset about the party mess. Teenagers say hurtful things they don't mean. This wasn't a momentary outburst, James. It was the verbalization of an attitude that has been building for months. I won't continue financially supporting someone who sees me only as a wallet. So you're punishing her, taking away college money and her car. I'm establishing boundaries. The primary college fund you set up remains untouched. I've only withdrawn the supplemental fund I established. And technically, it was always my car that I allowed her to drive. James ran his hands over his face. This feels vindictive. It's not vindictive to stop enabling disrespect. I still care about Zoe, but I won't be taken advantage of anymore. Later that evening, Zoe returned from volleyball practice expecting James to pick her up in her usual car. Instead, he had to collect her in his vehicle, breaking the news about the car sale during the drive home. She burst through the front door in a fury, storming into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. You sold my car. How could you do that without even telling me? I continued slicing vegetables calmly. It wasn't your car. It was my car that I allowed you to drive. There's a difference. This is so unfair. How am I supposed to get to school and work? The same way you did before you had car privileges. The school bus runs 3 blocks from here and your work is within biking distance. Her face flushed with anger as James entered the kitchen. Dad, she can't do this. Can she? Make her give my car back? James looked uncomfortable. Technically, Courtney is right. The car was in her name. We need to sit down as a family and discuss this situation rationally. The family meeting that followed was anything but rational. When Zoe learned about the credit card removal and college fund liquidation, her outrage intensified. You're trying to ruin my life, all because I said one thing when I was upset. Words have consequences, I replied evenly. You defined our relationship as purely financial, and I'm adjusting my behavior accordingly. That's not what I meant, and you know it. What did you mean then? I challenged. Because from where I stand, your actions have aligned perfectly with your words for months now. You accept the material benefits I provide while treating me with increasing disrespect. This isn't fair, she repeated, tears starting to form. Dad, tell her she can't do this. James looked torn. The financial contributions were Courtney's to make, and they're hers to withdraw. But Courtney, he turned to me. We should consider whether this is the best approach for our family. I have considered it, I assured him. Respect is a prerequisite for support. That's the lesson here. Zoe stood abruptly. I hate it here. I'm going to stay with Mom. At least she actually cares about me instead of just trying to control me with money. She stormed out of the room and up the stairs. 20 minutes later, she descended with a hastily packed overnight bag. James tried to convince her to stay and continue the conversation, but she was adamant. Alicia knows you're coming, he asked with concern. Of course, Zoe lied, not meeting his eyes. She said I could stay as long as I want. After she left, the house felt eerily quiet. Tyler emerged from his room where he had been hiding during the argument. Is Zoe moving out? He asked in a small voice. Nobody, James assured him. She's just taking some time to cool down. That night, I lay awake wondering if I had gone too far. The hurt from Zoe's words still stung, but my reaction might have escalated a situation that could have been resolved more gently. Then again, months of patient understanding had only led to increasing disrespect. Sometimes, a firm boundary was the only language that could break through entrenched patterns. I felt guilty about the impact on Tyler, who was caught in the crossfire of family tension, not of his making. Yet I also believed I was modeling an important lesson about self-respect and consequences that would serve him well in future relationships. James slept in the guest room that night, his silent protest against my unilateral decisions. The distance between us felt symbolic of the widening gaps throughout our once close family. Still, I held firm to my conviction that enabling disrespect served no one, not even the person being enabled. 2 days passed without word from Zoe. James texted her, periodically receiving brief responses that revealed nothing about her situation. He wanted to go to Alicia's apartment immediately, but I counseled patience. Zoe chose to leave. Let her experience the consequences of that choice for a little while, I suggested. She needs to miss home before she'll appreciate it. James reluctantly agreed, but grew increasingly anxious as the second day stretched on. What if she's not safe? We don't really know Alicia's living situation. If you're truly concerned about her safety, go check, I said. But if it's just separation anxiety, giving her space might be more productive. Meanwhile, I maintained normal routines with Tyler, helping with homework, attending his band concert, and preparing his favorite meals. I explained the situation in age-appropriate terms. Zoe and I had a disagreement about respect and responsibility. She's staying with her biological mom while we all think about how to move forward as a family. The reality of Alicia's apartment came as a shock to Zoe. The building was in a transitional neighborhood far from the upscale area she had imagined. The apartment itself was a one-bedroom unit with minimal furnishings. The refrigerator contained little beyond condiments and soda, the bathroom showed signs of neglect, and the closet space was already crammed with Alicia's belongings. Zoe would be sleeping on a pull-out sofa in the living room, which doubled as Alicia's home office during the day. There was no desk for schoolwork, no private space for phone conversations, and the Wi-Fi password was reserved for paying household members. Alicia had seemed delighted when Zoe first arrived, welcoming her with dramatic sympathy about the unfair treatment she had endured. But by the morning of the second day, her enthusiasm had noticeably cooled. The rent here isn't cheap, she mentioned over instant coffee. If you're staying more than a few days, we should discuss how you can contribute. Contribute? Zoe echoed, confused. You mean like chores? Alicia laughed lightly. Chores are a given, sweetheart. I meant financially. A part-time job would cover your food and utilities at least. But I already have a job at the bookstore. That money is for clothes and going out with friends. Well, priorities change when you're living independently. Speaking of which, I need the bathroom for the next hour to get ready for work. There's cereal in the cabinet if you're hungry. Alone in the apartment that day, Zoe discovered more uncomfortable realities. Alicia's boyfriend Todd stopped by unexpectedly eyeing Zoe with inappropriate interest while helping himself to the few snacks available. The building's washing machines required quarters she didn't have. The neighborhood offered no convenient places to hang out, and public transportation to familiar areas was complicated and time-consuming. She tried texting friends but received delayed responses. Most were busy with college application deadlines, sports commitments, or family obligations. The casual, "I'm staying at my mom's place for a while," messages she sent received brief acknowledgments but no invitations to meet up. By evening, the novelty of independence had worn thin. Alicia returned from work irritable after a difficult day, immediately claiming the television to watch reality shows at high volume. Dinner was frozen pizza divided 3 ways when Todd reappeared, monopolizing conversation with complaints about his ex-wife and boss. Zoe retreated to the bathroom with her phone the only private space available and sent me a text asking about her belongings still at home. The message represented her first direct communication since leaving. I responded carefully. "Your personal items remain in your room untouched. The household supplies and electronics that belong to the family remain in their usual locations." The measured response provided information without emotion, neither inviting nor discouraging further contact. I wanted Zoe to reach her own conclusions without feeling manipulated. Later that night, Zoe called James in tears. The pull-out sofa was uncomfortable. Alicia had suggested she apply for fast food jobs immediately, and Todd had made an unsettling comment about her pajamas. The glamorous urban lifestyle she had imagined with her cool mom had evaporated, replaced by cramped quarters and unexpected demands. "Can you come get me?" she asked, her voice small. "I want to come home." James arranged to pick her up immediately, texting me a brief update before leaving. I prepared Zoe's room, changing the sheets and placing fresh towels in her bathroom. I also made a batch of the oatmeal chocolate chip cookies that had once been our special project, the scent filling the house with a familiar comfort. When James's car pulled into the driveway, I stayed in the kitchen, giving father and daughter space for their reunion. Through the window, I saw Zoe exit the car, looking exhausted, her overnight bag now supplemented with a plastic garbage bag containing what appeared to be all her possessions from Alicia's apartment. Their voices in the entryway were hushed, and then footsteps on the stairs indicated Zoe was heading directly to her room. James joined me in the kitchen, his expression weary but relieved. "She's back," he said unnecessarily. Alicia's place was nothing like Zoe expected. "I thought it might not be," I acknowledged. Reality rarely matches fantasy, especially when the fantasy has been carefully curated. "Alicia suggested Zoe get a job to help with rent after just 1 day," James said, shaking his head. "And her boyfriend made Zoe uncomfortable." I nodded, refraining from saying, "I told you so," about Alicia's true nature. "Is Zoe okay?" "Physically, yes. Emotionally, she's pretty shaken. She needs time to process everything." He hesitated before adding, "She asked if you hate her now." The question caught me off guard. Hate had never been part of the equation, not even in my most hurt moments. "Of course not," I said softly. "I've been hurt and disappointed, but I've never hated Zoe." James nodded, squeezing my hand briefly before heading upstairs to check on his daughter. I remained in the kitchen, wondering what the morning would bring, and whether Zoe's return signified a genuine desire to repair relationships or merely a retreat to more comfortable accommodations. The cookies cooled on the rack, their aroma a reminder of happier times. I hoped we might find our way back to the warmth we had once shared, but knew the path would require effort from all sides. Breakfast the next morning was a stilted affair. Zoe appeared late, hesitating at the kitchen doorway before sliding into her usual seat. Tyler, who had been ecstatic to learn of her return, tried engaging her in conversation about a video game they had once played together. She responded with monosyllables, eyes fixed on her plate. I placed a stack of pancakes on the table along with fresh fruit and syrup, then sat across from Zoe. James alternated concerned glances between his daughter and me, clearly uncertain how to navigate the tension. "There's orange juice in the fridge if you want some," I offered, keeping my tone neutral. "Thanks," Zoe murmured the first word she had directed at me since her return. The day progressed with similar awkwardness. We all moved through the house in careful orbits, avoiding direct confrontation. Dinner that evening was equally strained, the silence broken only by requests to pass dishes or Tyler's attempts to fill the void with school anecdotes. As I cleared the table afterward, Zoe approached hesitantly. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. We moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa. James made himself scarce, taking Tyler out for ice cream to give us privacy. Zoe stared at her hands for several moments before speaking. "I'm sorry for what I said. About you just being the person who pays for things. It was mean, and it wasn't true." The apology seemed genuine, but incomplete. "Thank you for apologizing. That hurt me deeply, Zoe." She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Are you going to keep all my stuff sold? The car and college money and everything?" The question revealed her primary concern remained material rather than relational. "I think we need to rebuild trust before discussing financial arrangements," I said carefully. "Respect has to come first." "I do respect you," she insisted, finally looking up. "I was just mad about the party and everything with Mom, Alicia being back." I acknowledged her words with a nod. "I understand that you were dealing with complicated emotions. Having Alicia return after so long must have been confusing. But the disrespect didn't start with that comment, Zoe. It had been building for months." She had the grace to look somewhat ashamed. "I guess I haven't been very nice lately." "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is how we learn from them. I need some time to process everything just as you do. Can we agree to be patient with each other while we figure out a new normal?" "Okay," she agreed, seeming relieved the conversation hadn't escalated. "Does this mean I'm grounded or something?" "I think natural consequences have already provided quite a lesson," I observed. "But your father and I will discuss appropriate boundaries going forward." When James and Tyler returned, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. The tension remained, but beneath it lay a tentative foundation for rebuilding. I suggested we all watch a movie together, choosing a comedy that required little emotional investment. Zoe sat next to Tyler on the floor, allowing him to lean against her shoulder as he had done countless times before. The following week, we had our first family therapy session since the blow-up. The therapist, Dr. Winters, facilitated a more structured conversation about expectations and boundaries. Zoe participated more fully this time, acknowledging that her behavior had changed after Alicia's return. "I guess I felt like I had to choose sides," she admitted. "Like being close to my biological mom meant I couldn't still be close to Courtney." "That's a common feeling in blended families," Dr. Winters validated. "But relationships aren't a zero-sum game. Having a connection with one person doesn't diminish what you can share with another." Over subsequent sessions, we explored the complex dynamics that had led to our family crisis. James acknowledged his role in avoiding conflict rather than addressing problems directly. I recognized that my hurt had prompted a financial response that, while setting necessary boundaries, might have seemed punitive without sufficient explanation. Gradually, Zoe began to understand the difference between love and indulgence. "Alicia was willing to let me stay with her, but not if it cost her anything," she observed during our fourth session. She liked the idea of being my mom more than the reality of parenting. That insight marked a turning point in Zoe's perspective. She began seeing Alicia's attention as performative rather than substantial, noting how contact dwindled once Zoe returned home. The carefully constructed image of the cool mom had crumbled under the weight of actual responsibility. Outside therapy, Zoe and I began rebuilding our relationship through small, consistent interactions. We resumed cooking together occasionally, starting with simple recipes before attempting more complex dishes. We didn't immediately return to our previous closeness, but each positive exchange added a brick to the foundation we were reconstructing. Zoe got a second part-time job at a cafe near her school, using the income for personal expenses without complaint. She began researching scholarship opportunities to supplement college funding, showing initiative that impressed both James and me. I gradually reestablished financial support tied to responsibility. When Zoe maintained consistent grades for a semester, I offered to help with college application fees. When she reliably completed household responsibilities, I added her to a rideshare account for transportation needs. The most meaningful breakthrough came during a college tour trip 3 months after her return. We visited 3 campuses in neighboring states, spending hours in the car together. During one long stretch of highway, Zoe asked thoughtfully, "Why did you stick around through all this? Most people would have given up on me." The question caught me by surprise. "Because families don't give up on each other," I replied after consideration. "Even when it's difficult, even when someone hurts you. Real love isn't conditional on perfect behavior." She was quiet for several miles before saying, "I think I understand now why you did what you did with the money and stuff. You needed me to see you as more than a wallet." "Yes," I confirmed simply. "Relationships have to be based on more than transaction to be meaningful." Over the following months, Zoe's relationship with Alicia became increasingly distant. The occasional texts and calls dwindled as Alicia's interest waned, without the drama of family conflict to fuel it. Zoe seemed relieved rather than distressed by the fading connection, having recognized the manipulative patterns that had characterized their interactions. By the time Zoe's 18th birthday approached in the following November, our family had established a new equilibrium. Not the same as before Alicia's disruption, but stronger in some ways for having weathered the crisis together. We celebrated with a modest gathering at home, just family and a few close friends. Zoe helped plan the menu and decorations, keeping everything simple but meaningful. There were no extravagant demands, no dramatic interruptions. After the guests departed, Zoe handed me an envelope containing a handwritten letter. "I wanted to say some things I'm not good at saying out loud," she explained, unusually shy. I read it privately later that night, tears forming as I absorbed her words acknowledging me as family, not by blood, but by choice and commitment. She expressed gratitude for my presence through both good times and challenges, recognizing the stability I had helped create in her life. For her high school graduation, I surprised Zoe by reestablishing a college fund, this time as a joint account, requiring both our signatures for withdrawals. The gesture symbolized both renewed trust and shared responsibility for her future. "You earned this," I told her as we stood among the post-ceremony crowd. "Not by being perfect, but by growing through difficulty. I'm proud of the young woman you're becoming." The journey from hurt to healing taught me profound lessons about authentic relationships versus transactional ones. True family connections aren't based on DNA or financial provision, but on mutual respect and the willingness to work through challenges together. Love sometimes requires painful boundaries to grow stronger, much as plants need pruning to flourish. 6 months after the crisis that nearly shattered our family, Zoe introduced me to a new friend with words that healed the final crack in my heart. "This is Courtney, my stepmom. She taught me that family is built on respect, not just blood or money." What have you learned about setting boundaries in your family relationships? Has financial support ever complicated your connections with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most important transformations.